Teams get stuck. They don't talk. They talk around issues. They put off what they should talk about. And all of that, well, can be a problem. And what if we understood better why those things happen? And more importantly, how to move past those behaviors. If that sounds valuable, you're going to want to stay, because this episode is all about helping teams get unstuck so they can get better results. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping organizations and their leaders grow and lead more effectively to make a bigger difference across their teams, communities, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast, you could join us in the future for live episodes on your favorite social media platform and find out when that's happening, where that's happening, and how you can get involved by joining either our Facebook or LinkedIn groups, just two of the platforms where we live stream these originally. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to get all the info, sign up, and find out when we're doing episodes in the future. If you like what you're hearing today and want help developing the leaders in your organization, let's talk. Reach out to info@kevineikenberry.com, and we'll help you schedule a time to meet, to find out about your needs and see how we might be able to help. And with that, I'm going to bring in my guest for today, and I'm excited to have him. His name is Gustavo Razzetti. He's the best-selling author of Remote Not Distance, Stretch for Change, and now his latest book, Forward Talk, the bold new method for getting teams unstuck. Gustavo is a culture strategist, workshop facilitator, and keynote speaker with over 25 years of experience, first as a marketing and advertising executive, now as the CEO of Fearless Culture, a culture design consultancy. He's facilitated workshops with leadership teams at Mars, Microsoft, Merck, the Inter-American Development Bank, hundreds of organizations across the world. He's the creator of the Culture Design Canvas, now used by over 500,000 practitioners, and the Forward Talk framework, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. His work has been featured in the New York Times, on the BBC, Forbes, Fortune, and he's a regular contributor to Psychology Today. And with that, I'm going to ask him to say hello, because we're getting ready to start.
So hi, Kevin. Great to be here. And first of all, happy birthday.
Well, thank you. And I have a little bit of a delay for those of you watching this morning. I'm not exactly sure, but I apologize for that. But hopefully it won't get in our way too much. So Gustavo, why did you write this book?
Why not? I mean, yeah, right. No, I think that we're always looking for that big reason, but I think for me it was more the sum of different events, a pattern that I've been observing with different teams, that people, really smart people, were suffering not because they lack talent or ideas, but basically because they weren't having the right conversations. It sounds easy, it sounds even stupid. So of course, they should have. But when I'm talking about conversations, I'm not talking about using the right words or coaching people how to present a complicated thing in an easier fashion. I'm talking about more systemic patterns that are basically affecting those conversations. And I thought, okay, if I see these patterns, why not provide a solution so other teams can get unstuck as well?
Yeah, so you talk about these patterns, and that's really where we're going to spend our time today.
Mhm.
But one of the big things you're talking about here is that teams get stuck in part because they stay silent. And your observation is actually similar to mine, that the reason people are silent isn't always the reason that the popular press or people that do what you and I do might say. So let's talk about just that silence for a minute. Why is it that people stay silent?
Yeah. And I think the belief you're addressing is, in the past almost 10 years, we have an increased kind of a trend or approach that basically people don't speak up because the environment is not psychologically safe. I'm not writing off that concept. It's important that we create the right culture, the right environment, but there are other factors, right? And in my research, I realized that the most important reason why people stop speaking up is because it becomes pointless. they see nothing changes or nothing will change. So what's the point of taking that risk? What's the point of contributing with an idea? So take, for example, the annual performance reviews. As an employee, I'm asked to share what's working, what's not working. Do I have an idea to make things better? But then nothing happens, nothing changes. Those initiatives get either shut down or ignored or deprioritized. So people say, what's the point of me contributing?
Why would I contribute if it's not going to make any difference, right? And so I'm right with you because, yeah, if people don't feel safe, that's a reason. But at least as big a reason is like, it doesn't matter what I say. They're not going to pay attention. They're not going to listen. They're not going to act. They're not going to value it. So I might as well not say it. And if everyone's doing that, we got a serious problem, right? We got a serious problem. So the book is called Forward Talk. And early in the book, you talk about the difference between, and we really sort of have to talk about this to get the point of the book across, that there's forward talk, but there's also backward talk. And you're proposing that backward talk isn't always very helpful. So let's talk about what the difference is between them first.
Sure. They are basically conversations that move teams forward and conversations that move teams backward or get them stuck, right? So because they're in the past. But that's one of the two axes. So forward talk is based on a 2x2 matrix, right? One of the quadrants is the way out, forward talk. But we have three others that are the three patterns that get teams stuck or actually circling around. So we consider the forward pass orientation. We also have, are we addressing the issue or are we avoiding the real issue? So to your point, there are places in which people get along, they're safe, they're nice, they move forward, but they don't really address the issue. That's one of the patterns, groupthink. That means that we protect the harmony of the team, we protect getting along, having a nice time, agreeing. So we promote consensus, and many times we choose the safest idea over the one that we really need. So it looks that we're making progress, but actually we're not having those conversations. And at some point, groupthink not only is going to harm the quality of the work, but also at some point it's going to explode because we're not having those real issues being addressed. The other two patterns are avoidance. Avoidance get us stuck in the past because we don't address the issue, we don't have the conversations. We think that by no addressing the issues, that everything's going to fix on its own, but it won't. So it only gets worse. And lastly, we have blame. Blame is really easy to capture because we see when something goes wrong, we find who to blame, who's the culprit, who are we going to sacrifice, right? Like the ancient populations used to sacrifice a lamb to the gods to say, hey, everything's going to go away. But firing someone, it's not going to fix the problem. So we are talking about the issue, but we get stuck into what happened versus trying to say, what have we learned? What's in the system that we can fix, and how can we move forward?
So you talk about blame and avoidance both being about the past. Groupthink is at least about the future, but in groupthink, you talk about the idea of false harmony. And you said something a minute ago that maybe connects that a little bit to psychological safety. So let's talk about false harmony for a minute, what you mean by that.
Yeah, connecting to the first question, right? There are places that feel safe, but still nothing changes. So people contribute. My manager or my colleagues are super open-minded and create the right environment, but then they don't act. Or if they do, they tend to dismiss conflict. So every time I raise something that's not positive, no, let's basically don't open that kind of worms, or that's not the kind of things we want to have here. No, so we try to remove conflict as if it was something negative or bad, but relationships and teams thrive in conflict. So we need to address that conflict. We need to have tensions. We need to debate ideas. We need to disagree because real disagreements elevates the quality of the work. Quick agreement, consensus usually lowers that bar, and we agree to the easiest solutions, not to the great ones.
Yeah, I would even call that false consensus. I mean, I think true consensus gets us to exactly what you're talking about. It's just that that's not usually what happens, right? I think that's a true statement. So maybe the thing, Gustavo, that I will take away from the book and this conversation, I presume, the most is what I want to talk about next. You bring up this idea that I believe is yours because I've never heard it stated this way of conversational debt. What do you mean by that? We'll talk about the types of it in a minute, but whoops, I got the wrong slide up there. What do you mean by conversational debt?
Yeah. I wrote about it. I don't know if someone else spoke about it, but I say ideas are for people to use them. So it's not my idea. Now that I wrote a book, it should become everyone's idea. And it's the notion that we pay a price for not saying the things we want to say or we need to say. We pay a price for the questions we don't ask. And even we pay a price for the ideas that we don't share. Not only the team gets hurt, but also ourselves. When people say, I have a great idea, but no one's going to buy into it or they're not going to understand it, well, you're hurting yourself, right? So inaction has consequences. Inaction, avoidance, has a price. And that price becomes worse and worse over time. So the less we address issues, the worse they become and the worse that conversational debt becomes. Similar to financial debt, if we don't pay our credit card statements, if we don't pay our mortgage, the interests keep accruing. And I like to say that imagine that you get your statement on an envelope, the old-fashioned way, or you're checking it online. Not opening that envelope, not going to your bank account doesn't mean that the issue is not there. We're just avoiding it. So when teams or leaders don't want to address issues, the issues that still exist, they only compound, they get worse. That's conversational debt.
So you talk about three kinds of it, and the first one is alignment debt. And alignment is one of those things that we always talk about wanting and needing, and leaders are often focused on how do I create it, and yet you're saying, well, maybe we're not getting it even if we think we are. So talk about this alignment debt as one of the types of debt.
Yeah, there are three types of debt. I call them the ABCs, right? Alignment, belonging, and collaboration. So alignment, it's a really complicated thing, or complex, more complicated, because it's something that we should continually work on. No, but leaders want to think that, oh, everyone's on the same page. We got people to align. They think that it's convincing people about something, and that once you do it, check, you've done it forever. But alignment is a conversation. It's like a moving target. What are we trying to achieve together that we always are trying to address? Leaders and many people confuse agreement with alignment. I like to say that agreement is what's happening in the room. You and I can say, oh, yeah, we agree on this topic, and it feels that we're on the same page. But alignment happens after the conversation. Do we implement in the same direction? Are we consistent, right? And that's the issue. Most leaders don't validate alignment. When people are silent, when people nod, they assume that everyone is on the same page. And even if they are, you always need to check if people understood what they are agreeing or aligning on. I like to say, for example, how this decision or new direction is going to impact your team's work. What are you going to start doing differently? That's the way to validate actions, not just direction, which is more vague in concept.
I don't know if you wrote this, but the way I was thinking about it, and even as I'm thinking about it as I'm listening to you here, is that oftentimes leaders think about, well, I got alignment, check, like it's an event. But
Mhm,
I think what you're saying is we need to consider it more as a journey
mhm.
than an event. Is that a fair state? Again, you may have written that, but that's certainly what's in my head. Agree, disagree?
Totally agree. It's a journey. It's not a one-time event. And we might align on the long-term vision for a company or purpose or strategy, but then as we start hitting the different milestones, the difference are going to start surfacing. So we need to constantly check, are we aligning to the next milestone, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you there. There's often the illusion of alignment, and you talked about is that illusion connected to, well, I think we were in agreement, so therefore we're aligned. When you talk about the illusion of alignment, what are you talking about?
Delusion is first because leaders want to hear what they want to hear, right? So they ignore questions. That's a minor thing. But also they think that alignment means that people agree 100%. So there's this idea of disagree and commit. Leaders force agreement. They ignore dissent. They don't promote dissent, and they dismiss different perspectives. Actually, in many organizations, when you disagree, you're treated like a traitor, right? That you're not part of the team, that you don't want to support the direction, that you're not on the same page, on the same boat. But actually, the people who bring this dissent or different points of view usually are seeing the things that other people stop seeing or never saw. So that's the most important thing, that leaders need to challenge that people understand what they're saying, that they're totally aligned, versus people saying, yeah, sure, to move on, end the meeting, and go back to their jobs, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, if I just shut up and don't say anything, then this meeting will be over. So, which is pointing us to the second type of conversational debt, which is what you call belonging debt. Like, maybe I don't want to share that disagreement because then I'll be ostracized psychologically, right? So, like, talk about belonging debt a little bit.
Yeah, belonging is one of the most important human kind of instincts, right? Since the world became tribal, people learned that when you belong to a group, you can hunt, survive, cook, everything, defend from the environment, storms, other animals in much better shape. So since ancient times, we realized that being part of a group make us safer, make us stronger, and sometimes it's more convenient, right? Someone's going to take care of other tasks for ourselves. So every time we create dissent or we challenge groupthink, somehow we are testing how strong that sense of belonging is. To your point, do you want to be ostracized and fired from that group? No one wants. So we're always unconsciously testing how far can we go. The point is, stronger teams promote people to think differently. They think that harmony it's the result of hard conversations, not that we need to avoid hard conversations to protect that belonging. But most team things, to your point earlier, safe environment means, oh, we need to get along, it need to be all about giving kudos to each other, nice feedback, but never constructive one, never challenge our colleagues' behaviors.
There's a third kind of debt, and I don't want us to finish up without at least giving people the third kind of conversational debt, because I do believe that this set of ideas is critical and hasn't really been talked about the way you're talking about it here. And that third one is called collaboration debt, right? So we've got three words: alignment, yeah, we want that; belonging, yeah, we want that; collaboration, yeah, we want that too. And yet you're saying that often what's happening is that we're creating gaps with all three of these. So talk a little bit more about the collaboration debt.
Yeah. So the C of the ABCs of the three type of that. A collaboration is it's also challenging because sometimes we promote collaboration for the sake of it. There are some tasks where people and individual team contributors need to spend time on their own to do deep work, right? So not always collaboration, but sometimes people hide behind collaboration. So when we invite a lot of people to meetings, when we consult everyone, it's not because we want to get to better results. It's because we lack agency or we don't want to take the accountability or responsibility of making a decision. And this happens in meetings that we call a meeting. Let's say the two of us invite three other people, let's make a decision, and the decision making meeting ends with no agreement and ends with, hey, let's schedule another meeting and yet another meeting. So we keep procrastinating committing to something. And that's what happens with collaboration dev. We do work, but we don't produce anything. We don't make any agreement. We don't make any progress.
We have activity, but we don't have accomplishment. So
Yes.
Before we go, and before we start to wrap up, I've got a few final things for us to chat about. You have an opinion about how, like this whole conversation has been about interpersonal communication, interpersonal dynamics, behavior, all those things. And yet you have an opinion about where AI fits into all of this that I'd really like us to explore for a minute before we start to wrap up.
Sure. I think that we need to think of AI like an amplifier, and basically it magnifies everything that exists within team dynamics, whether it's good or bad. So in organizations that are suffering from groupthink, AI makes it even worse because everyone consults the same oracle, uses the same prompts, the same tools, and we all end up with the same kind of outcome, right? Also, research is showing that there's a lot of work slop, so it's easier to generate content, presentations, analysis, reports, plans, whatever with AI, but most of them are really low quality, but people don't care. So in organizations that reward, to your point, activity over output, people are getting, the bad employees are getting everyone else busy, because you as a leader need to review more decks, more presentation, more stuff that usually have a lot of mistakes, a lot of holes that you need to take care of.
And the thing I would add to that is, even if there aren't holes or actual mistakes, like even if you've gotten your AI skills a little bit above that, you're still basically creating the average, right? Because large language models are looking at everything. And so they're predicting back to average. And to your point, we're all going to get the same thing. So we're going to think we're in agreement. We must be doing something right. But we got to be really careful. I think even if we get past the holes and the mistakes, that the content that that the model is looking at is so important. And if we're not bounding that in any way, then we're definitely going to get those, what I would call average or mediocre answers.
Sure. And also to build on the alignment conversation, one phenomenon that's happening, a recent research shows that 29%, which is a huge number, and when it comes to Gen X, that goes to 40% or close to 40% of people are boycotting their employer's AI strategy, right? And this is new and people are not talking about it, because leaders are forcing people to use more AI without really addressing what's the role of humans in AI. And also they say, if you use AI more than others, you're going to get a bonus. If you don't, you're not going to get promotions, or actually you can get fired. However, if you teach your company how to use AI to be more efficient, then you're going to get fired either way. So people are silently, instead of having these conversations in the open, they're boycotting their company's initiatives. They're feeding models with not so cool information, so the outcome is really bad, and then the work suffers, so they're boycotting AI. They're also sharing confidential information with platforms to boycott their own company. So When leaders force alignment, in this case, hey, we need to use AI more without having the real conversations, we end up paying this kind of price.
So that last 3 minutes could be a whole show that we could have, but we don't have time, unfortunately, to do that today. But beyond what you just said around the organizational role with AI and being careful and intentional about that, and not sending mixed messages, what other organizational next steps would you say? Like, you've given a lot of things for us to think about as individual leaders, but if you had to speak to us with our organizational hats on for a minute, what would be one thing you'd want us to leave with in terms of an organizational next step?
Yeah, I see that there are many things to get started, right? One is we talked about the patterns, both the backward and the forward talk patterns. So hopefully people start seeing those patterns. At least when I started doing the research and writing the book a few years ago, every time I get into a meeting, I start to identify what pattern is present, how it's affecting. So if leaders and team members become more aware, at least you know what's the thing you need to start improving. Second is people struggle. I've been holding a lot of workshops, and the first question I always get is, how do we get started? And one thing I tell people are afraid, or maybe they think it's pointless to start these conversations, but I always tell that the rest of the people are waiting for them to do so, right? If the team is not performing well, if you're having a performance issue with one team member, people know, and people are anxious just as you are, and they're waiting for you to start that conversation. So why wait? Remove that anxiety from yourself and also from other people. Research shows that we fear conversations because we think that the outcome is going to go really bad, but in most of the cases is the opposite. We regret not the conversations that went bad, but the ones we never tried, the conversations we never had.
Yep.
Conversely, when people take the risk, when people start a conversation, trust increases, the problems get solved, and we find a way forward. So why wait?
Yeah, I love that. And I think that that's maybe a big idea of the book for me, is that multiple times you said people will think other people are thinking something different than they're thinking themselves. And you just, that was just an example. And like, we sort of know what you said is true, and yet we don't think others agree, and so we don't have that conversation. We stay silent. We don't take action. We don't initiate, right? Which is a big part of what you're talking about today. Before we go, Gustavo, I'm curious, what are you reading these days?
I read a lot of random things, from more intellectual to more shallow things, and of course the news. But I just finished reading for the second time A Meaningful Work, a book by Wes Adams and Tamara Miles. Really great, that reminds us that finding meaning at work doesn't require to change the world. Sometimes we can find meaning in day-to-day activities. We only need to know where to look for and what to look for.
We will have a link to Meaningful Work in the show notes, and note to all of you who are watching and listening, they have been on the show. And so we've talked about Meaningful Work on this show, and we'll point you to that episode as well. Where can we learn more, Gustavo, about you, your work, your team? Where do you want to point us? I'll hold up the book while you do that.
Sure. I mean, if you want to find the book, it's available in most retailers, both online and brick and mortar. And you can go to my website, gustavorazzetti.com, with double Z, double T. And you can learn more about myself, my other books, the services I provide companies. I also have a lot of free tools that you can download and start using for your own teams. And lastly, let's connect on LinkedIn. The last time I checked, the only Gustavo Razzetti there, so it's going to be easy for you to find me.
I think the same is true for me. We have that in common, sir.
Good.
So before we go, everyone, I have a question for all of you. I've asked my last question of Gustavo. My question now is for you. If you've been here before, you know I'm going to ask it. The question is, now what? What action will you take now as a result? because if you don't take any action, nothing good will come from this conversation. It's fine to say, yep, I'm seeing blame conversations. Yep, I'm seeing avoidance. Yep, I see this conversational debt. But if I only am aware of it, it's really not enough. We have to take action. So my hope is that you will think through the things from today that were most useful to you that you can act on right away. Because when you do that, the chances of great value from this goes way, way up. Gustavo, thanks so much for being here. It was a pleasure to have you. Thanks for joining and sharing your time, your talent, and your wisdom.
Thank you, Kevin. Happy birthday again. And thank you everyone for joining as well.
So everybody, I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you're subscribed wherever you watch or listen, because you don't want to miss any other episodes. Because next week we'll be back again with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast.